Welcome back, everybody. I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsor for this session, the Association of BC Forest Professionals. Please enjoy this brief video before we begin this panel.
We love trees here in British Columbia. We love how they look, how they give us shade, how they absorb carbon emissions, and give animals a home to live in. Even my house is made of wood. Pretty cool, right? But how can we take care of trees and use them well? It's simple. We trust the pros. Foresters from the Association of BC Forest Professionals don't just look after our forests and parks. They find ways to protect and restore ecosystems, protect wildlife habitat, and keep our communities safe from wildfires. They studied forestry at university or college, so they know what they're doing. They make sure the forest supports traditional Aboriginal uses, recreation, and tourism. Oh, and they also decide when, where, and how some trees can be cut, where other trees should be planted, and which should be left to grow freely. Now that's a perfect balance. The ABCFP is the largest professional forestry association in Canada. It ensures forest professionals are qualified, competent, and live up to a code of ethics. They love what they do and realize it's bigger than you and me. It's about us, our present, and our future. With the Association of BC Forest Professionals, our forests are in the best hands.
Thank you, ABCFP. Thank you, ABCFP, for your generous support of the event and sharing that video. And thank you to the audience for joining us for the next panel, Strengthening Communities Through Training and Employment. It's my pleasure to introduce this morning's speakers. Kim Baird, Chancellor of Kwantlen Polytechnic University, Judith Sayers, President of the Nuchana Tribal Council, Kory Wilson, Director of Indigenous Initiatives and Partnerships at BCIT, David Clifton, First Nations Business Development Manager for Meraki, and Randall Heidt, Vice President, External Affairs at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, we were running a little late. We had some technical problems getting the minister on board, and it is what it is, but I appreciate you guys being patient and waiting, and really just want to thank you for being part of this. It's always excellent when I get to see my friends in a business setting as well. I was kind of joking before that I had to get Randall on this hype because Kim, Kory, and Judith scare the shit out of me sometimes. In a good way, because I think of the laughs that we've all shared over the years, but just the strength of the three of you has been inspiring to not only myself, but many of the Indigenous people who are trying to find a path in education. And we're so glad that you guys have gone into the positions that you've gone in to try and enhance the opportunities for our people to get the much needed educations that we need to turn our communities around and lift up the levels of human well-being that exist. So again, I just really appreciate the opportunity to work with you all this morning. And Randall, it's always nice to see you, buddy. I can't really boss you around and swear at you like I usually do on the golf course, but appreciate you coming. And
I've really missed that. So
I bet. It's character building.
that's what you tell me.
Yes. So, David, nice to have you aboard as well. It's been nice getting to know you over the last few months and sharing some of the stories and the connectedness that we have between your family in the Comox Valley and some of the connections I have to Hartley Bay over my professional career. So, really appreciate you being here this morning. What I'd like to do is give each of you a few minutes to kind of make some opening comments around what you're doing in your fields and leading towards helping Indigenous people find that next step forward, and then we'll open it up for some dialogue between us and, time permitting, some questions and answers from the audience. I'll remind people to go to the Whova app and start to put your questions forward that you may have for some of our panelists now. So we are starting with, I'm so bad at this, we go through this in all the check texts, and we will start with Kim today.
And Randall can't save you, Dallas, I'm afraid.
That's true.
Good morning from Kwantlen Treaty Territory. My ancestral name is Quintiltana, and my English name is Kim Baird. And I'm happy to be on this employment and training panel, and thanks to Dallas for inviting me. I've had a fair bit of experience with employment and training from a community perspective through my past role as chief of Tualatin First Nation. And I spent a fair bit of time on training societies and the like while I was chief there, looking at skills development for Indigenous people. In my consulting practice for about the past 8 years, I've advised First Nations governments, companies around issues, and employment and training are always critical issues in relation to the people I advise. And some of the issues around employment and training have been the same throughout my career. I'm now Chancellor of KPU, which is very much concerned with skills development, and my role as Chancellor is ceremonial nature. So I'm glad I have a colleague here from KPU to talk more about that. But I think we all know that the opportunity for how meaningful employment can transform lives and communities is amazing. But the barriers for Indigenous people still persist, and they include a shopping list of issues, whether it's transportation and job readiness, childcare, literacy, the list goes on and on. Skills development through education and training has always been a major solution. And not only is it important for entry level, but can also help people be promoted to high quality and satisfying careers. So thankfully, there are two institutions represented here today to chat about the role of universities and the like in assisting communities. I would say in my experience that developing long-term strategies to take advantage of opportunities that First Nations have in their communities, whether it's through their own development or through development happening on their territories, is super challenging. At least I can speak from my own community's experience. And while I see improvements happening in communities across the country all the time, I do think it's hard to find the capacity to do the long-term planning that would really prepare people at the grassroots level for opportunities. And I haven't found this just on the Indigenous side either. Some companies have invested heavily in long-term strategies to increase Indigenous participation in their company. BC Hydro is an example that comes to mind. And at any rate, these are some of my opening thoughts on this topic, and I look forward to hearing the perspectives of my fellow panelists on these matters. And I'm very happy to be here. Heichka, I think I pass it back to Dallas now.
Thanks so much, Kim. Really appreciate the thoughts and the role that you're playing in just helping to be a champion for some of these issues. Next, we have Judith Sayers, President in the China Tribal Council, and I believe you also have an appointment at VIU now, if I'm not mistaken. So welcome aboard, Judith.
Yes, thank you, Dallas. I have the honor of being the Chancellor at Vancouver Island University. And hello to everyone from all of the nation's territories that you're tuning in from. I come to you today from the Nuu-chah-nulth territories on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And, you know, things like employment and training are exciting to me because it empowers our people. You know, when I was chief for 14 years, one of my goals was to ensure that every position in our community was filled with our own members. And if not, then, you know, members from other nations, and trying to ensure that we had taken the time to train our people. So one of the things I like to do was to build a database with all of our eligible workers, what their training was, what their skills were, what their desires were, where did they want to go. And anytime we decided to do a business, we'd go checking in the database and say, well, how many people do we have that can fill the jobs? And if there was none, then you had to build a training program so you could employ your members. Building training sessions can take many forms, and we're doing this through the Tribal Council. We either do our own training, we partner with Vancouver Island or North Island College, and those programs, we try as hard as we can to do them training in the community so our members don't have to leave to go into the university to get the training. Sometimes it's not possible, but where we can, that's what we like to do. Because it's just so much more comfortable to be learning at home, having family support, being in a safe environment, and doing what you can. We partnered with VIU, and this was before I was Chancellor, to do a training program so that members up in Northern Cayuga could get all the building skills necessary. They're building a longhouse, and that was an awesome project. We've been working with the college, North Island College, to do some language. We are trying hard to bring our members to fluency, and we have also partnerships with UVic in language and language courses. But we do partner. We're finding a lot more of our members wanting to train things like taking care of the land. How do we do that? How did we do that? Taking care of the fishery. And how do we build a capacity? How do we get our young men out on boats and doing the commercial fishery like their parents did or the grandparents did? What are those programs? And those are some of the things that we're going back to and trying to find, how can we do this best? We're also working on some traditional laws projects or up in the northern region, salmon parks. And forestry has just been horrible, horrible, horrible. And it's destroyed our salmon streams. And so we want to use our own laws to restore and rehabilitate those salmon-bearing streams. And so we've also working with people in community to work with speakers and knowledge keepers, our Hatwea and their speakers, our chiefs, to make sure that we can capture our traditional knowledge and use it going forward. I mean, that's what UNDRIP is all about. That's what this reconciliation is, our own laws. So like I said, there's some really exciting things going on besides all our traditional employments, and happy to be able to share a few of those thoughts with you this morning. Clayco.
Kayla Castle, thanks so much, Judith. It's exciting seeing the academic institutions reach out and build the partnerships that suit First Nations communities. And I think that's kind of a common theme we'll hear throughout this morning's session. Kory, super dude, how are you? It's nice to see you. I don't think I've seen you in person in too long, but that time will come. Why don't you share with us some of your thoughts on where BCIT is with some of these initiatives?
Great. Kayla Castle, Dallas, thank you. And I can't wait to see you in person and see your girls as well. So I'm coming to you today from Treaty 7 territory from Banff. And I'm very grateful to be here. And also for those of you that are tuning in, wonderful to have you and really appreciate and honor your interest in this topic. It, of course, is an exceptionally important topic. Indigenous people, as you know, are at the negative end of every social economic indicator in this country, in a country and land that is obviously ours. We are the rights and title holders. And it's important that we work together and work in collaboration. And there's been many great initiatives and many great programs and things that have happened, but we really need to continue to work together with post-secondary and industry and high schools and with First Nations as well. And so some of the things that we're doing at BCIT, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing at BCIT. We have launched an Indigenous vision. We have our schools and departments are creating their own reconciliation action plans, recognizing and knowing, of course, that the role of reconciliation or the action that needs to happen to go towards reconciliation is everybody's responsibility. It's just not the responsibility of the Indigenous people, but every Canadian has a responsibility to advance reconciliation in the place and spaces that they occupy. So we are working really hard, and I want to say hi to my colleagues at BCIT who I know are tuning in, who have been really honestly, authentically engaging and working incredibly hard to do, whether it's a cohort program that we're doing on campus or in Kitimat or in other places around the province, whether it's how we support students inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Those things are extremely important. But this session is really about partnerships and collaboration. And I just want to mention to those who are from industry that it's really, really important that you work with us and work with the post-secondaries and the First Nations, because gone are the days where you can just call us up and say, hey, I need, 4 foresters, or I need 4 accountants, or I need 4 of whatever, or however many numbers. It's a slog to get students to get to their degrees, whether that's the challenges and barriers they face in the K-12 system, financial barriers, moving. There's all kinds of barriers that are very challenging for Indigenous learners to get to post-secondary, as well as completing their degrees. And so we need to start building those relationships and building relationships. Industry can start building relationships with students in high school. We have an Indigenous Youth Forum that we do every February. So if you want to join, let us know, and start meeting people and encouraging and mentoring, maybe some young people to go into forestry, or young people to go into clean energy, or whatever your company's priority is. But building those relationships and that engagement that is authentic and is sustainable, where if we work together, together we'll be stronger, and you will have the Indigenous employees that you want. And it's also about approaching First Nations and building relationships with First Nations, Indigenous communities, and finding out what they want. It's not about us as post-secondaries or as industry saying, hey, we're going to do this project and we're going to do X, Y, and Z and hire X, Y, and Z person as well. It's really authentically engaging and finding out what are the needs of that community. Again, there's no sense creating jobs and programs that that aren't sustainable, that aren't going to last, that aren't going to benefit First Nations communities, that aren't going to actually address some of the most contemporary concerns that Indigenous nations have in this country. So it's about coming to the table authentically, coming to the table and with the courage to have uncomfortable conversations, to talk about those elephants in the rooms, and to actually work together towards solutions that will benefit not only Indigenous people, not only your bottom line, but also at doing the best to protect the environment and to inspire the next generation. So at BCIT, I certainly know my colleagues here at the other 2 institutions as well are committed to doing that, and open to discussing and working with industry and trying to see how we can work together, leverage our resources, and use them as effectively, efficiently as possible. I look forward to further discussions. Thank you.
Kayla Castle, Putlidi. Thank you, Kory, so much. That's tremendous. David, how are you doing, pal?
All good over here, thanks.
So you're an interesting segue into the transition of what Kory was talking about, where industry can work with both the communities and some of the institutions and play a role in making sure that Indigenous people are trained for the jobs at hand. I think of some of my cousins in the 80s or 90s when fishing was starting to come down, and they just got trained for all these various tickets for jobs that never existed. And so maybe you can give us some insight on just, what Meraki does and how you guys go along doing some training programs.
Great. Well, thanks for the introduction, Dallas. And again, I'm David Clifton. My feast name is Heidt, Machinim, Seoul. I'm from the Gitgat First Nation on the north coast of BC. And today I'm honored to be talking to you from the Kaitlyn First Nation on the south coast. So I put some thought into employment and training and how industry plays an important role in increasing these opportunities with First Nations, and also to increase participation in natural resource projects for First Nations and the resource projects that are happening in their unceded and traditional territories. And what I mean by increased participation, yes, I mean increased employment and training, but also increased meaningful engagement, increase collaboration, increase economic gain, so that the majority of profits and benefits from the development of natural resources stays with the First Nation communities. Employment and training can be challenging, and I see far too often that industry drops the ball here. And I'm just saying this from experience from my own nation. I see companies fill out a job description, they email it into the band office, and they sit back and think their job's done. And they expect their inbox at HR to be full of these glowing resumes with First Nations candidates from those communities that have university degrees, they have 5 years experience in the field, they have all the training necessary to apply for that job. but we know this is rarely the case. Industry can do better, and they can do more. One of the goals at Meraki Resources is to increase employment and engagement with First Nation communities throughout the province. And we sat down and we identified 2 obstacles that were blocking our path to success to achieve this. One of them is to increase interest in forestry with First Nation community members. And you can imagine how difficult that is, especially with the youth, because the youth, many of them think they'll make millions being a professional video game player or a TikTok or Instagram influencer. So how do we get them interested in forestry? Secondly is, how do we provide interested First Nation community members with the skills and training necessary to be successful in employment opportunities with our company? So this was the gap, and we had to bridge it. So 3 years ago, the Forestry Tech Bridging Program was born. We sat down with one of our First Nation partners, and we said, let's collaborate together to have a community developed plan that focuses on your own community's members so that we can achieve this success together. So it was a 5-week program that we put together. Half was in the classroom and half was in-field training for its members. The in-field training, all participants worked alongside our forestry technicians and professional foresters to gain hands-on training and mentorship throughout the program. At the end of the program, successful graduates had a job waiting for them at Meraki Resources. So the big question is, what were the results? Was it successful? And I'm happy to say that yes, we immediately hired 2 full-time employees from this program, and I'm happy to say we've added 3 more. So we now have 5 First Nations employees working out of our Fort St. James office, and they're valuable and contributing members of our organization. Because of the success, we're going to run this program again this fall with multiple First Nation partners, and we hope to grow this, in the years ahead as new partnerships grow throughout the province. We can't take all the credit for this. A lot of the heavy lifting was done by the First Nation. They had to share the vision to see this project through to success. And yeah, we're really, really appreciative of the efforts they put in. So what do you do with a First Nation employee once he's walked through the door and once you've hired him? How do you retain him? And how do you build meaningful capacity? So that's the next chapter. And hopefully our great moderator, Dallas, will allow me to touch upon that topic a little later on this panel. Toyishut Newsome, thank you.
Kayla Castle, thank you, David. Really appreciate that, and we'll definitely get into that as long as Randall doesn't eat up all the time. But no pressure, Randall. Dude, so good to have you here. The work that you did while you were at North Island College really helped open our eyes up to just how we can make some of this work as opposed to making it happen. So why don't you take some time and share some of your thoughts with us?
Sure. Thanks so much, Dallas. And I'm honored to be here on this panel. So thanks so much for inviting me. I'm coming to you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, where I've had the great pleasure of working with and becoming friends with former Chief Rob Everson. So I'm so grateful for that. Well, I'm currently the Vice President of External Affairs at KPU, Kwantlen Polytechnic University. I've only been here 3 months. And therefore, the majority of my examples that I'm going to bring forward are from previous places that I've worked, including working with Dallas Smith. I'm hoping to tell you 3 quick stories today about how I've worked with First Nations in the past to help Indigenous students and communities, in hopes that it'll give you some ideas of how you could work with First Nations moving forward and hopefully inspire some collaboration there. First, I want to talk about the Nanwakolas Council Golf Tournament that I worked on with Dallas for basically, I think, the last 7 years. And what's really great there is when we started working together, the tournament had about $30,000 in terms of an endowment. And now it has, I think, more than $160,000. And it's providing an annual bursary every year for Aboriginal students to attend North Island College. And I'm really proud of this partnership. Not only because it's helped many students gain education and training and therefore employment, I'm really happy to see how it helped both Dallas and myself grow. Dallas has become this great philanthropist that he is today. And we started working together, and we wanted to just initially provide access to education for Indigenous students. But as we gained momentum, I was really touched and inspired by Dallas when he said one day that he no longer wanted to just get Aboriginal students in to post-secondary. He wanted to get them through college and help them all the way through. And that was really inspiring for me. Another example is with the Nanwakolas First Nation in Fort St. James. We did an applied research project with them when I was at the College of New Caledonia in Prince George, so in northern BC. And it basically started out as a small project where we were trying to help them grow tomatoes in a greenhouse in northern BC, which, as you can imagine, is somewhat challenging with weather and other things there. And it's now grown into this thriving business where they not only are employing people and providing fresh produce for the people of Fort St. James area, but they've now also, they have traditional medicine in there as well, so that elders can have the access to ingredients of traditional plants that can allow them to create traditional medicines. And so that's another example. Another one that I was fortunate to work with when I was at the College of New Caledonia was with Duzcho logging, where they had, they needed some roads. And so they, instead of just wanting to work with a construction company, they wanted to actually train, their members. And we created a heavy equipment operator program where they were actually able to learn and build roads for the nation at the same time and create that infrastructure for the community in the Mackenzie area and the McLeod Lake Indian Band that really has some very good businesses still to this day. And I guess if there's one piece of that I'd like to leave you with, it's just get going. Don't do something. When Dallas and I started working together, it's all about relationships. And when we first started working together, it went well, and then it went really well. And then we've helped so many people. So, my examples today were not intended to be a one-size-fits-all solution. In fact, I would advise you that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And when you come to working with Indigenous leaders and Indigenous communities, and I think Kory said it very well, you can't come in with a one-size-fits-all. It's not going to work. So what you have to do first is develop relationships together. And find pathways, find ways forward, find ways that will benefit each First Nation that you're working with. And, I learned a great word yesterday from a KPU Indigenous educator and curriculum consultant, Dr. Jennifer Anaquad. And she said, we need to add a new word to truth and reconciliation, and that's reconciliation. And I think that that's so important. I'm going to use that, Jennifer. Thank you so much for that learning yesterday. And that's what we need to do. We have to have reconciliation. Thanks, Dallas.
Yeah, thank you so much, Randall. I'll again remind the audience, if you have some questions, please put them up in the Whova app. What I'd like to talk about next is, I think you all alluded to it a little bit, is how do we prepare our youth at a younger age to continue their studies and get in their fields. I know at Nanwakolas we started a career pathways network where we wanted kids as early as grade 9 to start thinking about, what do you want to do? Do you want to work in your field? I think Judith was talking about some of the great work that they're doing in their communities around land restoration and things like that. And I think that's a dialogue we need to start at a younger age. Too often, training and work programs were about displaced workers. And I like to see the new focus that you guys are all bringing around, youth engagement. So maybe Kory, what are some of your thoughts on, where do you think we should start when we're trying to recruit people into these education fields to find a better way?
Well, I think two things, and not to make light of it, but the reality is it has to start from birth. We have to raise our children to be strong, proud Indigenous children, boys, girls, non-binary, whatever they are, to be proud of who they are and have self-assurance. And I say, if you could teach yourself to love life, love learning, and love themselves, they're going to be okay. They will find their path in life that maximizes their skills and abilities. And I think as First Nations, as older people, if you will, we've got to look at all the young people in our life. How are they doing at reading? How are they getting the skills that they need to be successful in school? Are we holding the schools that our children go to accountable? Are our children graduating with dogwood diplomas versus evergreen certificates? What are we doing to ensure? Are they taking Math 8 instead of Math Essentials, which will not lead to a dogwood diploma? So many of our kids are marginalized and streamed out of the possibility of getting a high school diploma as young as grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. So we need to be assured that our children are being taught the way that we deserve to be taught, and are not being streamed, and are being supported as they should be at a public K to 12 system. And as they get older and we work on that self-esteem and work on that, then we expose them to all different types of things. They need to, at first, Indigenous kids need to see things to dream it. And then once they can dream it, they can be it. So we need to expose them to role models. We need to expose them to opportunities. Companies need to, bring them into the company. Order pizza, truck in a bunch of kids, do a bunch of activities, show them what your company does. You have to feed them. Remember, you got to feed them, give them some swag. But we need, again, this is where we need to work together, to, especially on young people. And when it comes to those that are, ready or adult and ready, able to go to post-secondary, it's again exposing them to the opportunities and helping support them to close that gap. If they're missing a prerequisite, or if they're missing an English, or missing whatever it is, how can we deliver what they need in the most effective and efficient way? COVID has done wonders in the sense of, has shown people that we can educate and do very academically rigorous education online. So we need to meet the learners where they are, provide them with what they need in order to make the best informed decision to determine their future and where they can best use those skills and abilities. And again, it will take all of us to do that. And that's where we have to start having those conversations and building those relationships, and ensuring that, looking at being student-centered and student-focused, and not just always about, and recognizing that it's about building relationships that will be maintained over several years. And it can't just be a one-off program where then 6 weeks in and you expect everybody to enter what X program. It's got to be, further up the chain there, and where we all work together to do that.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great answer. I know it's been enlightening for me to be involved in my daughter's studies, and they're only in grade 3 and 1 respectively, but it's really important that the parents play that hands-on role in making sure there is that accountability, which kind of leads into my next question that I'll give to Judith from one of our audience members. How does the panel see training and employment initiatives incorporating Indigenous knowledge and ways of being?
Good question. Thank you for that. I think us designing curriculum as First Nations people is the best way to do it. And that can be done, doing your own training programs, or working with any of the educational institutions where you have a strong role in curriculum development. And this starts, way back at preschool, kindergarten, and trying to do that. I forgot to mention that we have a Nuu-chah-nulth economic training program, and we try and do a lot of the culture into that. And so that's really important, when you're learning about natural resources, trying to instill in them the values of the land, our relationship to the land and the water and the air, and just making sure that when they act, that they will be keeping the values that they've been taught and that our ancestors have been taught. So I think really it's trying to take control of curriculum development, of training. We're working with the RCMP, trying to put some cultural learnings for them. And so that definitely has to come from our people, our elders, our knowledge keepers, and letting them know what they need to know so that they can value our people and respect them. So I think it's something that we just have to do, and we have to be prepared to put the time and effort into any of our training programs to be including our traditions, our values, our protocols, land acknowledgements, and those kinds of things. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. It's exciting. I know Nanwakolas has been working with VIU on our Guardian training programs. We've had 3 cohorts go through now, and it was enlightening for VIU to actually engage us on the development of the curriculum for it, and just break down some of those barriers. So instead of getting our kids down there to get the education. We actually brought the instructors up to Campbell River and were able to have this close-knit support system that was very inclusive of elders and knowledge keepers. So that's tremendous, Judith. Thank you so much for that. Randall, for remote communities, IT connectivity is challenging. As such, learners usually have to leave their communities to learn. How can remote connectivity become more available? And in the interim, what supports can be given to prepare learners to learn, live away from their communities? I ask you that knowing that your son was back east for a while, doing some schooling, but also playing some hockey. So I know you've had that remote connectivity issue.
Yeah, thanks, Dallas. I think that's actually one of the most important things that we need to fix right away. Connectivity is so important. You know, as was mentioned before, there's lots of great programs that can be delivered online, but that's assuming that people have access to, you know, high speed Wi-Fi and connectivity. So I think that's something that we all need to work on. I believe that there have been some companies that are doing that in northern BC and some other areas. And I actually plan to continue to do that here at KPU to ensure that there's connectivity everywhere. I think, you know, that's one of the biggest issues that we have is that connectivity. But I think one of the most important things to overcome it is to do teaching and learning in community whenever you can in First Nations. One of the great things that North Island College did, and my team was fortunate enough to write a grant, is we actually had the nursing students in the first year go to First Nation and work with them in community. And what happened there is the students really learned so much about traditional ways of learning, doing, and knowing. And so there was a great learning from those students in first year who went on to be nurses and who are still in the nursing program. And they will learn so much about just by being in community, learning from elders, learning from the land. And I think that's actually a really great opportunity. Online education is fantastic, but learning in community from Indigenous elders about traditional ways is probably one of the most valuable learning experiences that any student could have. So I know it costs more. I know when we're at post-secondary and it's difficult and it's expensive to deliver community in-program learning, but it's so vital and it's so important. And I would encourage, businesses can even help sponsor that, where they could get involved and help pay the difference for post-secondary to be able to go into community. And I would encourage businesses to do that. And if any of them want to work with me at KPU, I would love to do that with them.
Thanks so much. Great
little
answers,
commercial
everybody.
there, Dallas. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll respond to that at Dallas4BC on Twitter if you want to hear about that later. While
my Chancellor is here, so I
plugging.
have to make sure yes.
David, another question from the audience. What are your thoughts on training and employment-related construction and maintenance trades in general, and that these opportunities typically create a situation in which you have to follow the work, which typically takes you away from the community and the family you grew up in as these projects and maintenances are completed? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that times are changing and that the economic opportunities within that are close to a First Nation now in their home territories is changing and is developing. And that goes for all natural resource projects. Like other industries, sometimes like if you're in tech, you got to move down to the big city. You have to move elsewhere. But in the construction and natural resource sectors, quite often these jobs will keep you close to home now. And I think we're in a period of transformation where the opportunities close to home are happening and gaining steam. I'm really excited actually for the opportunities for First Nations moving forward. I recently moved back to Canada and have been immersed now with my company and First Nations for the last 6 months. And I couldn't be more excited. So when I left Canada 7 years ago, it's a much different landscape now. So I think that they should keep their hopes up, that training and jobs will happen closer to home, to look for a company that will invest in you, that will take the time to build meaningful capacity and take you under their wing and give you those apprenticeship opportunities, that mentorship. And I think these opportunities will grow closer to home now. Thank you.
Good stuff. We've got another question here from the audience. Kim, further to incorporating Indigenous ways of being in training, can comment on what support is available to help Indigenous peoples learn how to navigate those two worlds that are often at odds? And how is industry helping Indigenous people to confront colonialism in business while trying to uphold cultural values? There's a lot in that question, so I'll let you have a chance to chew on that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen various examples emerging. So the BC infrastructure um, group dealing with all the major projects in BC are trying to do training for all people on work sites in relation to Indigenous matters and work safety and those sorts of things. So having curriculum more readily available about cultural competency or whatever you want to call it, where you're providing people information about Indigenous issues really makes a difference in relation to how everyone views these matters on the job site. And I think what I've been impressed with is the kind of increase of interest the public has in relation to wanting to know more about Indigenous matters since the terrible Kamloops residential school discovery and the supply way or the demand way outweighs the supply available as far as the level of interest the public has in learning about these matters. So I think in this broader scope of Canada, learning about Indigenous issues, that's going to make a big difference about people's view about Indigenous issues and dealing with Indigenous people on work sites and things. Different companies have other ways of addressing cultural safety. Some are better at it than others, but I do think that should be strategies all companies keep in mind. And I think that should be something that First Nations should work with companies on trying to ensure that their members feel safe on job sites wherever they may be. That's my preliminary answer to a very complex question.
That's great. We are seeing, I mean, allyism, I don't know if that's a word or not, but it's unfortunate that it has taken some of the drastic news that's come to light recently to bring these around, but they are coming around nonetheless. And I think we need to be ready to almost tell people where we need the help instead of kind of just asking for help in general. It's where do we need these help in bridging some of these gaps that are there. So moving on, how do you change policy within the colonial system that has standards that need to be met in order to gain admission into a particular program? A lot of First Nations youth or First Nations people in general do not go into some of these programs because some of these standards scare them. They don't think they fit within it, and it just kind of eliminates some of that potential. What are institutions like KPU and VIU doing to address this? Judith, maybe I'll start with you first since we've got to let Kim take a breath for a minute. Or Randall.
Okay. I think that universities are trying to become more flexible. You know, they have Indigenous plans and trying to open up the ability to do things like research in our own way. So it's not your standard written essays, that you can actually, do artwork and you can do other kinds of methods to do your research. But you're right. I think universities have their standard requirements, and that Indigenous students may struggle through those. But I think once you get through those, there is a lot more opportunity. We're seeing a lot more courses that create interest with Indigenous students, but there is a long way to go. I know my daughter had a huge fight with the University of Victoria so she could do her dissertation in Indigenous literature, and she had to fight to create her own comps list of the books that she wanted to study. She wanted to study Indigenous literature, and they wanted her to do the 100 Old English books, which would be a waste of her time. Had a huge fight with the university, and sometimes it takes this. But I'm hoping now, with more open minds, that we can create that. And with more Indigenous professors, it takes an effort to change things, but some positions are being created to, such as UVic with Rabina Thomas. And I can't remember her exact title, but she's Indigenous something or other. And so things are changing. They're not perfect yet, but I think universities are opening their minds more and trying to find ways to accommodate interest with Indigenous people. Otherwise, Indigenous people aren't going to go to their institutions. And so it takes time. Some have already paved the way, and in other disciplines, they haven't. So I don't know if there's one standard answer, Dallas. Thanks.
No, that's great. I think that's a great point. In these dialogues are happening. I mean, the progress is never enough. That's why we need to keep at it. But just seeing all of you involved in the positions that you're at are making those discussions relevant. I think when my mom went back to university in the late 80s and the challenges that she faced and some of the battles that she fought, like your daughter did, just to make sure she was learning what she felt she needed to and wanted to, but still fit within the system and the programs and things like that. And it's tremendous to have you trailblazers out there in a position to just help further that discussion. So I think we all really appreciate that. Randall, maybe just a couple thoughts from the KPU perspective on that question.
Sure, Dallas. I'm honestly so excited to be at KPU, and I'll just rattle off a few things that we're doing here, starting with our Chancellor. I mean, I think it's fantastic that, we are one of the only universities, and I applaud VIU as well for having an Indigenous Chancellor. I think that is great. I'm happy that at Kwantlen that we're one of the only post-secondary institutions in Canada that actually has the name of the First Nation where the campuses are located. Also, some of the other things we've done is we have an appointment of a special advisor for Indigenous leadership, innovation, and partnerships, Len Pierre. He's absolutely amazing. I've learned so much from him, even in a few months that I've been here. And we're doing a speaker series with him, and you can actually go online and watch the last one that we did with him last month. We also have an Indigenous Advisory Committee where we talk with local First Nations to find out issues from them directly and training that they want for employment. We also have an Indigenous peer mentor program where our basically students who are in second year and beyond will mentor other Indigenous students as they come into the university to make them feel more comfortable. We also have an Indigenous community coordinator that really helps recruit Indigenous students and help them get outreach and engagement in the community. We also have a new Open Doors, Open Minds event that's coming up that's going to help Indigenous students be exposed to STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math careers. And I think that's very exciting. And the last one I want to mention is, and I'm very proud to be involved in this as well, is we're creating our first Indigenous strategic plan. And what's interesting too is even in the early meetings that I've been to, they stopped calling it a strategic plan because that's a colonial word. And so we're calling it Pathways to Systemic Transformations. And that's one of the things that I'm really proud to be involved in, working with Len Pierre, working with our Chancellor, Baird, and others to try to do that. And so those are some of the exciting things going on at KPU. Thanks, Dallas.
Thanks, Randall.
Can I add something to that, Dallas, please?
Please.
Judith and I have been reaching out to other Indigenous chancellors across the country to talk about some of the challenges post-secondary institutions are facing in relation to trying to find their indigenization paths and strategies, because universities are challenging bureaucracies to navigate. And it's going to take a focused, considered effort, I think, to think about what we want to achieve in the sort of area of reconciliation and universities' participation in that, including addressing some of the concerns raised in that question, and including things like racism and increased participation of Indigenous students and all those things. And although rates are increasing, I think we could be very strategic and reach out to other people working in this field to have a better sense of a way forward. And I think the collaboration with other universities would be an amazing opportunity.
Oh, that's tremendous too. I mean, we focus on BC so much, but I shouldn't say this to these people in the education field, but it's only plagiarism in college, right? If we can learn from each other and move these discussions on. Kory?
Yeah, I just want to add, I mean, this is happening already. Universities Canada, Colleges and Institutes Canada, we have Indigenous education protocols that have been around since 2013. We are working together. There's plenty of opportunities for post-secondaries to continue to work together. BCIT's been leading the field in terms of Indigenous education for well over 25 years. We've got a lot of lessons that we've learned, a lot of perhaps, things we would choose to do differently, but we're moving forward. And I really appreciate, obviously, what Kwantlen and VIU have done as well. But we're all in this together. I think all of us simply want Indigenous learners to go to post-secondary. Where they go, of course, it's what is best for them. But I think we really need to work together and come up with ways and develop ways to ensure that they're successful. And, having an Indigenous vision, we're going to be launching our second Indigenous vision next year. And again, it's recognizing that everybody in the institution has a role to play in reconciliation. We have all kinds of key positions that have direct access to presidents, and that is wonderful and fine and amazing. However, it can't just be up to the Indigenous team to do this. So it's also looking at ways to systemically change the system. And one of the things that we've been doing at BCIT, as I said earlier, is getting our schools and departments to create reconciliation action plans for their department that we support them with, but it comes from their department. And in many ways, they're not most of the areas don't have Indigenous people there. So it's about non-Indigenous people really truly examining ways to become the best allies. And also we're using this acronym IDEAS, so that hopefully it will encourage everybody to always use an IDEAS lens, which stands for Indigenous Diversity, Equity, Access, and Sustainability. And so really working hard on that. All of our senior leaders are evaluated on what in our yearly evaluations on what they're doing to advance reconciliation, what they're doing to advance, global skills. There's all kinds of different competencies that we have to account for. But again, we're, the 25 institutions in British Columbia, there's a lot of ways, and I really look forward to continuing to work with the people on the call to advance this in a way that, again, is efficient and effective and will benefit all students around the province.
Tremendous stuff. I got one more question, and then we'll move into some just parting comments that you might want to leave with our audience and viewers. David, once the training is complete, the employment has been secured, how do we make sure that there's development opportunities to ensure continued success and prosperity in the long term? I know that's something that Meraki puts a lot of thoughts to.
Yeah, well, once you've hired the Indigenous employee, your job's not done. It's just starting, actually. And this is going into employee retention. And I think the first thing you need to do is make sure that employee wants to show up for work every single day. He wants to go to work in an environment where he feels comfortable, where his Indigenous world values are accepted. It's a culturally safe area for him. And this starts with cultural awareness training. And this should be for all employees throughout an organization, not just senior management, because they won't be working alongside the CEOs or CFOs. Quite often, it's going to be through other people in the organization. So right down to the entry level, the company has to have cultural humility, willing to adapt, willing to learn, willing to grow. You're blending two worldviews together, and there has to be patience. It's going to take hard work, but that's going to provide that good environment for the employee. Secondly, it's going into the meaningful capacity building. That's continued education, training, mentoring, apprenticeship. You need to set them up for success. Empower your First Nations employees. They'll get self-worth. They'll want to stay with your company or not. That's a risk, but it's no risk, no reward. But invest in your employees. At Meraki, we have 37 Indigenous employees at our organization. And it's not just entry-level positions. We have some that have gone through training. They're heavy-duty machinery operators. We have 2 training for junior supervisor positions. 2 are in management in our company. It makes our company stronger, makes our company better, makes our company more resilient. It's fantastic to have the Indigenous people in our organization. And then longevity. We have multiple Indigenous employees that have been with us for decades, 2 for over 35 years. Why? Because we've done these 2 things: cultural safety and empower them. And this is just one thing you can do to provide actually a good environment where they're going to stay with you for the long term. Instead of short-term job opportunities, which they often get seasonal and project-based, set them up for long-term success. Give them a legacy of skills and experience to take with them.
That's great stuff. I really appreciate the knowledge that you all have shared with us today. What I'd like to do is give you each 30 seconds for just kind of one message you'd like to leave with our audience. And I'll do it the same starting order. So I'll go with Kim.
Yeah, not much to add. It was a great discussion. Really happy to have been amongst such a variety of panelists, and great to hear all the great things that are happening out there. I think at the end of the day, I agree with Kory's earlier comments. We really have to focus on supporting children to reach their learning goals, especially if we think about things like STEM and, help with poverty and help use partners and all those things to really try and make a difference to younger generations. And I'm excited by all the work underway. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Kim. Judith, any final thoughts?
I just think that we need to identify our needs in all of our communities and find the best way possible to fill those needs, whether it's training, whether it's university, and including our culture as much as possible, designing something that's meant for us. We've been in the colonial systems too long, and now's our opportunity to hang on, grasp on, and do what's best for the people that we serve. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you. Kory.
I'll just leave it that everybody has a role in reconciliation. So everybody, every single person, every single Canadian needs to ask themselves, what can I do to advance reconciliation? Look around the places and spaces that you occupy, and if everyone looks like you need to do something about it. So I encourage everybody to do that, and knowing that, of course, we have to do this together. Together we are stronger, there's no question. And it takes courage, and we need to be bold. Gone are the days of just sitting around having these nice discussions, but really, how do we get in and have authentic, sustainable relationships that lead to concrete actions, not just tokenism, not just platitudes. And just because you do a land acknowledgement, it doesn't mean you are an ally or a champion for reconciliation. So we need to convert that into measurable actions and metrics. Thank you.
So true, so powerful. Thank you very much. Mr. Clifton.
So I think in our experience, we know that you can get positive results by working with First Nations communities. Collaborate with them often and for the long term. It's beneficial not only for the First Nation, but it's beneficial for your company. You're going to build meaningful long-term human capital with your First Nation partners. The company is going to be a better company for it. It's good business. It's smart business. We're just getting started, and we're excited to do more and work closely with our First Nations partners in the province. Thank you.
Kayla Castle. Thank you, David. Final words, Randall.
Thanks so much. I've learned so much from everyone here today. So I'd say get started, do something. Sometimes when I go to conferences earlier in my career, I'd get overwhelmed by how much learning there was. And then when you go back to work, you don't even know where to get started. And I would say just try to pick one thing. Try to pick one local First Nation, Indigenous community, or even an Indigenous learner to help and do something. And try to just take a step forward towards truth and reconciliation. And like I said before, I think probably the most important thing, and I think Kory's right in what she said, we actually have to have some deliverables. We have to do something. And therefore, as I learned yesterday, reconciliation is, I think, something that we all need to work towards and actually do some things that improve life for everyone.
Thank you so much to all of you for sharing your time, your energy, your thoughts. Just again, being a father of small children, I'm happy that their opportunity to be who they are and who they need to be is enhanced every day by people like yourselves in the education field, in the training field of what you're doing. And let's just keep chipping at it, one day at a time. That's how we're going to get past this. Pointing out colonialism isn't reconciliation. And I think that's a message you guys all pointed out very clear today. So on behalf of IROC, I just want to thank you all for your time and look forward to seeing you all very soon. Kayla Castle.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Dallas. Thanks, everyone.